Welcome to the JD Bunkis podcast. Leafs are officially on Wagon watch. A game that 2 weeks ago, you would have guessed they lose 6-2. The Toronto Maple Leafs come up with a huge overtime win. 8-0-2 in their last 10. 12% of their season. 12% of their season now, they have looked like one of the best teams in hockey. So yeah, it's a smallish sample size, but it is a significant one considering the way that this team looked. I mentioned this a while back. I will double down on it. The way that this team started the season, when they started to kind of string together a couple of wins, I had mentioned on this show that it was going to take something fairly significant through the Christmas break for me to change my opinion on what this team could or could not be. And with last night's win, I think that we've officially arrived there. Yes, there's absolutely a scenario where over the next 2 weeks with the strength of schedule, they come out of this and that belief is shaken to a certain degree. I guess the difference is when you put together a stretch like this and you play a game like you did last night, where again, it's a complete team effort where you lose a forward at the very beginning of the game and you just go toe-to-toe with the league's best team. And I've seen some what's that thing? The deserve to win-o-meter. And it's tilted pretty heavily for the Avalanche. That's why you got to watch the games. If you watch that game and your belief was the Colorado Avalanche win that thing 70% of the time, you're out of your mind. Out of your mind. If you thought that the reason that the Leafs won that game is because Colorado had their third string goaltender in net, you are out of your mind. Does a different goalie maybe make one of those saves? All right. I guess. If you want to play the what-if game, the Leafs looked every bit as good as the Colorado Avalanche did last night. Flat out. Watch the games. If you stayed up, which I did, and you know what? I'm grateful that the Leafs played a game like that last night where people do stay up and they invest in the team and they do sacrifice a little bit of sleep and say, yeah, I want to watch this hockey team. They've earned that right. Again, I think 2 weeks ago, you're probably not. You might give the first period a go and then flip it off and just say, yeah, that was what's the point? But they are now officially in a playoff spot. We're going to be doing standings watch all season long. That's going to be one of the entertaining things about this year. One of the departures from years past that people pointed to when they were sucking was, hey, at least they got to grind to get into the postseason. Hey, maybe that's different. Maybe having things to play for that are this heavy instead of just home ice advantage or not, or finishing third or second in the Atlantic is going to matter for these guys. And right now, it's hard to believe that that's not going to have any impact on this roster whatsoever. There are two things, though, that are most important to me when I'm watching them right now. And one, we're kind of almost beaten to death, but it's impossible to ignore, is just how connected they look as a team. The vibe around them when you see, and listen, it's easy to be, if you're 8-0-2 and 10, I would guess a lot of people would say, yeah, it's easy to be up when this is happening, but what happens when you go through a lull? I really do believe that they're better prepared for that now, given their personality makeup and the balance that they have on the ice to endure a stretch like that than they've been in years past. It no longer feels like it's just the stars that need to carry this hockey team. It no longer feels like if you go through a slump with William Nylander or with Austin Matthews or with John Tavares, who is absolutely in one right now, that you're not going to be able to compete. and that we're going to be doing these questions about shuffling the bottom six and more guys trying to get involved and blah, blah, blah. It does. It feels different. I'm sorry. I know that makes you look foolish in this market because only one team can win, and that hasn't been the Toronto Maple Leafs since 1967, but it does. I've been around this team for a long time now. I've watched them my entire life, and I've covered them professionally now for over a decade, and I can tell you that I honestly feel as though this is a different vibe and that this is a different hockey team than we have seen with past iterations of this core. And that's not to say that I think they're going to win a Stanley Cup. But if you would have told me, hey, these guys are going to lose Chris Tanev essentially for what feels like the season, I know that they're still waiting on those reports. If you told me that they were going to be trying to duct tape their blue line together, that they'd missed this many games of Stolarz, and look as concrete as they did on the road yesterday, after the start that they had to the season, I would have called you nuts. I really did. I thought that this year was just about draft picks, whether or not you were going to convey it to Boston or whether or not you were going to luck your way into a lottery pick, because that's the way they looked. That was the information that they gave us. It was a lifeless team. It's hard not to point to certain things like some of the injuries giving guys added time, the injuries adding guys like Troy Stecher to this locker room. But man, oh man, they look good. So yeah, the first thing is just their connectivity as a group, the way that they seem to like each other, the way that they support one another, the way that they look like they're having fun. Those things matter. When you show up to work and you're having fun, it's going to be better than when you're showing up and it's a drag. And we have absolutely seen different iterations of this team showing up to work and looking like they're having absolutely no fun. They're standing in front of the media. The body language is piss poor. The product looks flat. Guys don't look engaged. Guys don't feel involved. Players are in and out of the lineup. It's not. It has been very different than this. The other thing is just the way Austin Matthews looks. He was as good as Nathan MacKinnon was last night. He was as important as Cale Makar was last night. He was turning pucks over. He was threatening for long stretches of the game. He gets reunited with Bobby McMahon, which, by the way, good coaching by Craig Berube to make that adjustment. Craig Berube probably not getting enough credit during this stretch because we're throwing a lot of praise on the players, but he has clearly made adjustments. He has clearly gotten more guys involved. He has started to lean more. He went away from the thing that we've criticized the Leaf for year over year over year, which is even when things are going wrong, they never really moved the formula around. And instead, Craig Berube, who when things were going wrong, and it did feel a lot of the same for stretches of the season, was, oh, my God, all right, Nylander back up. Oh, okay, we're just doing the same thing. All right. Power play had been stagnant for so long. Now that's flipped. Now you got a guy like Michelli on there, and Tavares sacrificing his ice time, and what are important points for a guy who is struggling the way that he is 5-on-5. There's more sacrifice on the roster. There's more minutes being spread around. There's more fun being had. There's better coaching happening. The superstar player of the team is looking great. William Nylander jumped right back into the fold and looks like himself. I think that he had a bit of a quiet game, to be honest, but that overtime, he's spectacular there. You lean on him. He forces an incredible turnover on Nathan MacKinnon and then scores a goal. Things are just going great. There's really, I don't even really know what you would be complaining about right now with this team. Like what the issue would be, because I know that that's absolutely a tendency of this fan base. That's a tendency of this media market. You find things to talk about. I don't know what that is. I'm not sure what it is that you would sit there and say, well, I don't like this. What's the story? That one of the goalies is going to come back and now you have three really good goalies? Ooh, compare that to where we were at a month ago. Not even a month ago, 3 weeks ago. It's nuts. Anyways, it is Leafs game day. Score a Popeye's chicken sandwich for only $6 in classic or spicy. Make it your new game day tradition. Get your $6 sandwich at a Popeye's near you. James Mirtle of The Athletic joins us now. What's up, buddy? How we doing?
Playing hurt, JD. That was why wasn't that a 9:00 start last night? That's what I want to know.
I don't know, but first of all, I don't want to hear any complaining. McKee was sending me texts last night too, where he's like, "I'm tired." I'm looking at him going, "Your show starts at 4:00 in the afternoon. How dare you be discussing this with me? You know where Sammy is right now? He's in bed. You know where you are right now? And is that a robe? Is that a cardigan? Like you're in your little home.
Mm.
You're all warm in your bed, having a sweetheart of a time. I was so tired this morning that, you know, when you're drunk and you don't remember how you got home, you wake up in your bed and you're like, oh, I actually don't really remember going to sleep. I was so tired this morning that when I got to work and I walked through the doors, I went, how did I get here? I don't remember waking up and getting to this position. So nobody gets to complain. I'm sorry. Only I get to complain.
So it's going to be a good show then. It's going to be a hallucinatory show.
That's the only problem is I'm already a repeater, and I'm a little nervous about being Mr. Repeater today with a hollowed out brain. Okay, so how much has your mind changed?
Oh, I mean, night and day.
Yeah.
No, I mean, how could it not change?
Yeah,
I guess there's the thing in the back of your mind is that how is this going to last? Like, is this what they are now,
totally.
or
Yeah.
is this the blip, or is this, this is closer to what we thought they would do coming into the season. No one was saying that this was going to be an 80-point team, and all of the things that we talked about, the positives with this team, that they could get good goaltending, that they would score enough goals, that they would have depth down the lineup with the forward group. It's all finally come to fruition here. So I just can't remember another Leaf season where they looked as bad as they did and then look as good as they do now. And the switch flips, and there's not one. I know they had injuries, but it wasn't, like Tanev's still out. Stolarz is still out. They still do have guys that are injured. It's not like it's just someone getting healthy and things have turned around. It's a lot of the guys that looked bad 15 games ago look great right now. And it's funny, that game against Vancouver, Nylander comes back and they move McMahon down to the fourth line, and everyone kind of groans and says, how can you do that? He looks so good on the first line. And I looked at it and I was like, well, I can see the rationale behind this because everyone is playing well. The other lines look so good. You don't want to break up what you have going with how well Michelli's playing. You don't want to break up what you have on the Waugh line with the way Robertson and Cowan were playing. And, with the Robertson injury and with how McMahon played last night, that kind of alleviates that concern. But it just shows how well basically everyone is going, that it can be hard to find minutes for guys right now.
Yeah, it absolutely can. I'm concerned for Robertson just in terms of the season that he's having and how good that line has looked. But yeah, the idea that you can now just plug and play, you have a whole bunch of different options at your disposal the way that guys are going. And the way that Waugh and Cowan have played, I would think that someone jumping onto that line would be far more exciting. If you're William Nylander, for example, and that was where they decided to put you, are you going to view that as a demotion? I would say no. I would say that you would maybe feel some measure of excitement getting to play with those guys. If you're, Matthew Nyes, it's the same thing. Whatever iteration of player that they decide to go with there, because the team is balanced and because they are spreading the ice time around, and I know like guys like Lawton are still last night probably only around 12 minutes, but the idea that there's going to be a night where depending on the situation or depending on who's going, that you could jump that up to an easy 16, 17, 18 minutes is not foreign to them. Like you look at the Bobby McMahon situation, and he does get demoted to the fourth line, and you could say whatever you want. It still is a demotion. And he ends up with 18 minutes last night because he's going, there's an injury, and he acquits himself extremely well, where he scores a goal and he's impactful throughout the entire game. I can't remember a time where the Leafs felt this balanced lines 1 through 4 with their forward group in this era and these iterations of teams. Can you?
No, I don't think so. Not where you're looking 9, 10, 11 forwards down the lineup and saying, hey, this guy could have a big game, or this guy's going well, or this one, and it feels like what you're talking about for the first time over these last, whatever you want to call it, 10, 12 games, Berube can decide to dial up the minutes for the fourth line or dial up the minutes for the third line. And there are some games where that Waugh line isn't the third line and they're playing as much as Tavares, and they're just based on who's going or based on situations, right? If they need a goal, you play a different line, like Lawton and Lorentz probably play less just because they're looking for a goal a lot of that game and the opponent and things like that. But if they're playing defensively, like if they were up 3-1 in that game, potentially that fourth line plays more than the third line. And that's great that you've got the functionality that of the different lines, the way you can use them and the minutes you can give them. And that's the way that it should be. And it hasn't been for too long because it's been such a two-line team, with the way that with the cap being flat. And I mean, we don't have to relitigate everything that happened with the roster the last few years, but it's been very much a tale of two teams, and all the guys at the top making a lot of money and getting all the minutes, and then your bottom six, you're just trying to get by. And as a viewer, you're watching and you're just waiting for the big guys to go over the board so something will happen. Whereas now every line can make something happen, and you've got to go. I'm trying to think when the last time that would be. I mean, maybe early in the rebuild years when you had the luxury of, you had JVR and Bozak on the third line, and then you had dangerous players, you had Kadri, you had Matthews, you were really stacked at center. That's probably the last time that they had this luxury of where you could get something down the lineup night to night the way they are right now.
Yeah, and as exciting as those times were, and there was absolutely more depth, and I think that's the right answer to the counter. Your stars were still in their infancy, right? And as much as they were putting up points, and Matthews showed up game one and scores 4 goals, and he had the beauty against the Washington Capitals where it was like the lacrosse style goal. Those guys were not established to the degree that they are now. Auston Matthews is a far more complete player than he was in the early stages of his career. So I think that you are seeing not only that balance, but the evolution of those star players. So to me, there's a couple things. I think that the injuries happened at the right time, gave guys roles where the Leafs were forced to lean on them. It moved their hand out of something that they were comfortable with, get more guys to play major minutes. 2 is, we had a lot of conversations about whether or not the pieces were correct, more specifically about Maccelli and Dakota Joshua than they were about Waugh. Because even when he was having his worst games, I never got the sense people couldn't appreciate some of the things that he did and how different he looked from third line centers that they've had in years past outside of the Ryan O'Reilly edition. But I always had this feel that one of the issues with the Leafs was that no matter what your depth was, they were not going to be able to implant or plant their DNA onto the stars, right? That the premise of you have these types of players who are a little bit more passive personalities, who are a little bit more up and down when it comes to their style of play and it being aggressive. It doesn't matter who you add down the lineup. You're not going to be able to change the vibe of the team, the ethic or the ethos of the team. And whether it was bringing in Stetcher at the right time, whether it was Lawton returning when he did, I really do feel in my bones that those two guys in particular, and others deserve credit too, but those two guys I think are the poster childs for changing the attitude around this team. That those two guys came in with a level of desperation, a level of play, a level of passion, a level of just good personality mix with the hockey club, and that as they started to win, that started to permeate a little bit throughout the roster. And now you're seeing that rub off on everyone, and everyone start to play a little bit more like those two with that added level of desperation.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't even know. I don't really have a counter to that. I think you're 100% right. And not having Lawton early in the year, I mean, there were snide comments about, oh, you don't have a fourth line center and it throws everything into disarray. But he's so much more than that. And I know you and Sammy on your show, and I've been saying it too, that Lawton should be playing more. I mean, he is a pace setter for this team, and he's a leader. And he really struggled coming in last year. I mean, what did he have, 4 points in 20 games or something like that?
And he was a no-show in the playoffs.
And then you watch him this year, he misses a huge chunk of the first half with that broken foot suffered in preseason. And he's been fantastic. He's their second best defensive forward behind Matthews. He's led the penalty kill way up the charts in terms of where now it's one of the best penalty kills in the league. And even when he's only playing 12 minutes, he's just killing himself out there to leave everything that he's got on the line. And, there's talk, I was talking to our Flyers writer, and they're talking in Philadelphia, we got to get that guy back. The Flyers are looking like potentially they could be a playoff team, and they're saying we miss this guy and we wish we had him. And that game where the Leafs go in there and they honor him, all the conversation from Flyers fans is like, boy, how did we let that one get away? Whereas early in the season we were talking about giving up the first round pick for him and how bad that trade looks right now, and there's not a lot of conversation around that right now.
Well, and conversely, or additionally, imagine they had made the Braden Shen trade. Not to say like he's not a good player, that he wouldn't be fitting in with this team, but if you get Braden Shen, you're losing Easton Cowan. You're also losing that draft pick. You're losing more in the cupboards to acquire him. He's making more money. And you've also got Luke Shen on the books because you were forced to make that move as well. It was a coinciding move, according to Nick Kyprios, where they had to add both of them. And just what the value add is of Braden Shen versus what you're getting from Lawton right now. I'm just not sure what the difference is in terms of how much more you would have had to pay by throwing in your very best prospect into that trade. And like, listen, he makes money too. Lawton right now is what? Because is he retained?
Yes.
Right.
So he only makes 1.5 on the cap.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's a $3 million guy, but he makes 1.5 on the cap. The cap space has turned out to be unbelievably important for this team for the reason of you're really seeing what the difference is of having bona fide NHL players down your roster instead of a collection of 4A guys who are a little too good for the Marlies, but not quite good enough for the NHL.
Yeah. And even the luxury, Stetcher's not making a lot of money, but you can just bring people in when you need them. And you can carry extra players on the roster. You can have a competition for those spots. And when they were healthy and they were they had the luxury of sitting Michelli or sitting Joshua and motivating those guys and pushing them. And, when you're rayed out maxed against the cap and you have a league minimum roster of 20 players, you can't do that. You're waiting for an injury for someone to come up and change the mix. So, they've had a lot more flexibility that way. And some of the injuries have given them that flexibility too. Put Stolarz on LTIR and all of a sudden you've got money that you can play with. And, they've used that pretty well. So, a lot of the talk coming into the year, remember in training camp, we were how many forwards they had and they were going to have to dump somebody, and how are they going to find minutes for everybody? And it's probably going to have to be 2 forwards that go. And, it turns out Kampf is the one that goes. You get out of that cap hit entirely. And, I'm working on a piece now looking at their cap situation. And if they do want to do something at the deadline, they've got lots of flexibility to do what they want to do. And the thing too, with how everyone's played up front, no one's talking about them needing a top 6 forward right now.
Yeah.
I mean, they're one of the highest scoring teams in the league. I think last I looked, they were 5th. They're probably higher than that now. If the power play gets going, offense isn't a problem. So really all you'd be looking to do is use some of that cap space to bring in a defenseman. And that's a tale as old as time with this team. With you look at all the defensemen that they brought in at the deadline over the years, but and the only question is going to be: is it going to be a grade A top pair guy? Is it going to be a second pair guy, or is it going to be someone who's a depth defenseman? And they've got some time here before the Olympic break to see what this group of 6 that they've got looks like, and to further evaluate Tanev and see if they think he might be back by the playoffs. And then they're going to have to make a decision because the trade deadline is going to be basically right after the Olympic break.
So they absolutely can make an addition. I'm still not a big believer that they will make one of major significance simply because I think Easton Cowan is now harder to move than he was even a year ago when he was in trade rumors. That the idea that you would move him for, anything short of a bona fide star player is likely not going to happen. And my guess is that he's also not a prospect or player of consequence great enough where a team would look at him and say, yeah, we'll do that trade where he's the absolute centerpiece coming back. They still don't really have their draft picks. Everyone I talked to about Ben Danford, like, congratulations to him making Team Canada, but the idea that, again, he is a centerpiece for getting something of major consequence doesn't seem to be a reality. And you also have some pending free agent questions that are going to happen with this team, with a couple of those guys that have been able to play in the top 6. And my belief is you would be curious as an organization to see how they play out the rest of the season and how they look in the postseason in terms of what you're doing with them moving forward. And that includes Robertson, that includes Michelli, and that includes Bobby McMahon. So I just want to quickly touch on a couple of those guys before I go to the defenseman stuff. McKee and I were talking about it last night. I'm personally in the camp of let them play it out, let you actually see it over the course of the season. Don't just try and buy low, or in the case of McMahon, at this point, I would think that you're buying high considering the month that he's put together. But if the Leafs tried to extend Bobby McMahon now, what do you think that number would look like?
It depends what the term is on that deal, I think. And I think the thing I would try and do now with him is maybe throw some term in there and get the number down and see if he bites on that. Because this is a guy, late bloomer, 29 years old, wasn't drafted, 4 years of college, ECHL a couple of years. Early in the season, I talked to him about being in the ECHL, and you could just tell the way he talked about it. And I mean, they were basically in like rooming houses, and he talked about the food and the 18-hour bus trips and everything. And he's come so far, so fast for him. And I think if a guy like that, you throw some term at him and the dollar number is something that starts with a 3, I wonder how hard he thinks about that and taking the thing that and I know he loves playing in Toronto, and I think that could potentially be a win for the Leafs. And like at 29, I think he's going to get a huge number if he goes UFA. There's just nothing available. He had 20 goals last year. He's on pace for high 20s this year anyway. Guys like that with his speed and his size, even without the overt physicality that maybe some other players have, I think he's going to get well over 4 million as a UFA. I would say probably 4.5 with some term. So if you're the Leafs right now and you can offer him 3.5 or 3.6 or 3.7, but go longer, maybe he thinks about doing that. And I have a hard time seeing that being a contract that hurts the Leafs.
I wouldn't think that hurts the Leafs. For me, it's more a conversation about, do you want to keep certain guys hungry? Do you want to have guys play out this year with that level of desperation, or do you want to tinker with that? And I'm not saying that I frankly, I don't know him well enough to understand whether or not he's the type of personality who would get the money and pull the foot off the gas a little bit. I would just think that given what you just outlined, that he was not too long ago in the ECHL, that he was fighting for this contract extension this season, that he has kind of constantly had to prove himself, I think it's just a little bit of human nature where all of a sudden you're set for life with a contract like that, and it doesn't feel as desperate. Because one of the things I like the most about McMahon this year is it's not the goal scoring. That's something I believe he can do. The speed has been there all along. The size has been there all along. There's been an edge to his game and an attention to detail that has been, to me, materially different than what we've seen in the past. And I'm not rocking the boat for saving $500,000 on a contract extension. I think like if you have success and he wants to be here and come season's end, given what their cap situation is, you're still probably going to be able to make something work, even if you're going a little bit shorter on the term and higher on the dollars.
Probably, yeah. I mean, generally the advice from an agent in that situation is if you get to April and you don't have a deal, it's like, let's just wait. I mean, we're almost there anyway. So let's go to UFA and see what the offers are like. And that's where the number can get driven up. And there's going to be so little available. I mean, there's the talk is that Nick Schultz is the big prize in out in Utah is going to be the big prize, who we'll see tonight in UFA. And like, beyond that, the teams are just going to be so hungry for guys with size who can skate, who can score goals. There's a world where Bobby McMahon gets 5 million. I was looking at comparables for him, and one of the ones that came up was Tyler Bertuzzi. And he got 5.5 million, and he's having a great year for Chicago.
When the cap was
and
lower.
Bertuzzi, the cap was lower, yeah. And Bertuzzi had a 60-point season at one point, but most of his years look kind of like what McMahon's done this year. And McMahon's is a better skater and is a bigger guy, and he's younger. So there aren't that many comparables that come in at a really low number that can do what Bobby McMahon does. I mean, you look at the disastrous deal that the Oilers signed with Trent Frederick with 8 years, and I think he's got 3 points this season. Those kind of players get paid.
Yeah, and Trent Frederick, who has also been healthy scratched in this season, where they gave him that contract extension. It's rough. It's a rough. It got the wheels beaten off of him the other night. I watched a fight with Trent Frederick. I went, oh, he did the full turtle, mercy, please stop making me fight move. And I went, well, this kind of feels like a guy who's trying to do too much because he's not living up to the contract. Yeah, I wouldn't be like, listen, if he ended up getting signed during the season and it was something that you're talking about, and there was kind of a consensus that if he was going to hit the market, he could get a number that was $1 million more a season. You're right. I don't think it's a situation where it would hurt you. I'm not going to be overly against it. My only thing is I just like the hungry element to this team right now. I like that they have a bunch of guys, Lawton included, who you're looking at and saying, what are you going to have to pay these guys in free agency? They are playing for their money. And if you're the Leafs, having the comfort with the cap situation of, we're going to be able to pick and choose which one of these guys we think best fits the roster moving forward. And to me, Lawton would be the priority over McMahon. And same thing goes for Michelli. I just don't think that there's anything that he's going to be able to do during the regular season because the playoffs is going to have to be a test for him. And that's something I would say about McMahon too, is last year he had a terrific season, showed up in the playoffs, and was fairly invisible. He didn't really show up down the stretch. So you do have that with him that I think is a little bit than the Tyler Bertuzzi comp is you could lean on more seasons of getting a consistent, this is what you are getting from Tyler Bertuzzi versus what you're getting from McMahon. So to me, I play it out, but again, I'm not heartbroken if they extend any of these guys to a reasonable number and reasonable term during the season if they think it best fits them. Okay, so you mentioned the blue line thing being the area of focus for this team and what they're going to do. I keep losing sleep, not just because of these games, but at the idea that Tree Living continuously stays enamored with Rasmus Andersson and won't move off of that idea and ends up putting a trade package together that I just really don't love. The conversation right now, though, is kicking around Dougie Hamilton, a Toronto guy who is not – it's not happening in New Jersey. You would think that some people have made the parallel to Seth Jones. Like, I've gotten multiple text messages where you go, like, well, it's Seth Jones. He's only a year older than Seth Jones, makes $9 million. He's turning 33 in June. And, yeah, some of the underlying numbers for him have not been sparkling for the last 2 seasons, but he's an offensive defenseman, and he has proven to be that throughout his career. A change of scenery, certainly you could make the case, like Seth Jones, could behoove this guy and benefit this guy greatly. What's your read on whether or not the Leafs would give some calls there, especially considering, Brad Treliving has already traded for that guy?
Brad Treliving, I mean, they're going to call, right? They call on everything and they look at everything. But I don't see that as what they're looking. I don't see that as like a Berube fit, right? With what they're trying to do and what they're trying to build. That's
they need
like
to be
Seth
able to
Jones,
move the puck, and he does that.
Yeah.
You're trying to build a team that can move the puck.
Hey, I like Dougie Hamilton. I'm just saying, like, the conversation you're talking about that's happening is more in the market as opposed to with the Maple Leafs, right? And the names that I don't think they're going to, they were frustrated with the Rasmus Andersson situation last year. They went really hard at that last year. That was the player that they wanted instead of the Carlo Lawton situation. They were going to go big at Andersson. And the front office, I think, felt that Calgary just was going to want more from them than another team, which has been talked about a lot with the Tree Living situation and everything going on there. And they didn't think there was a fair deal to be made there for Andersson. So maybe they revisit that, but I doubt it. I think that Calgary's going to want a first round pick there for one, and the Leafs don't really have one to give. So, and I don't see them trading Cowan for him either. So I feel like that was a hard trade for them to make last year when they did have the first round picks. I think it's even harder to make now, and I just don't see that happening. So Hamilton, I wonder if you could get some retention on that. I wonder what kind of an asset. I wonder if there's any kind of an asset there that New Jersey wants back. I mean, if you can get him at a lower cap hit the way that Florida did with Seth Jones, and you're not giving up a lot, then 100%, I think that makes some sense. But the one, I can't remember who made the comment, but I saw one comment on social media and it said that Toronto would eat Dougie Hamilton alive. So make of that what you will. But I mean, he's a guy that's got a quirky personality that's bounced around a little bit. And some of the more old school personalities in the league haven't always been enamored with just the quirkiness of his personality and the way that Dougie Hamilton is. So is that a fit here? I guess we'll see. I mean, people wondered what the fit was going to be with William Nylander and Craig Berube, and they've managed to make it work. So maybe there is something that can happen there. But I just find that a little bit of a stretch that this front office is going to look at Hamilton as the answer.
So to the Toronto would eat him alive point, he's 32 years old. He's also played in the Canadian market. I would guess he's with the Boston Bruins. Like I don't know. I'm more a believer in when you reach this point of your career, and if you're frustrated in New Jersey and you're adding to a team that has this kind of vibe around it, and all kinds of other targets when it comes to fan ire if things go poorly, you're to the stumbling blocks with the Dougie Hamilton trade is last year when Seth Jones was traded, Chicago retained $2.5 million of his deal. That's it. 2.5 million. And granted, his deal was much longer. So it ended up being the biggest retention in NHL history, just in terms of like the total dollar amount year over year, having to pay that 2.5. But for a guy that was a distressed asset and who everyone knew needed a change of scenery out of Chicago. And like, I don't care how you feel about Seth Jones versus Dougie Hamilton in terms of, hey, well, Seth Jones has such a higher ceiling or he's a better defensive player, whatever it is that you want to say. That situation was ugly. They needed to move off of him. He was a distressed asset. They got Chicago to pay 2.5 a season, and it still cost them a first-round pick and Spencer Knight. So the idea that the Leafs, I think obviously they need to get retention, but for me, Dougie Hamilton makes $9 million, and as great as your cap situation is, the fact that he has 2 more years after this, I don't know how you could possibly make the case that you're going to add this guy unless the retention is 50%. Bring him down to 4 or 5. And
I can't see.
That's what I mean.
I can't see New Jersey who's not going to want to do that, right? Because I mean, I know they're struggling right now, but they are going to want to contend. So they're not going to have that kind of dead money on there. That's the difference with Chicago, right? Is that they're not really in their contention window. Mm-hmm. The cap's going way up. They're not as worried about that 2.5 on Jones. That's 2 or 3 years from now.
So what do you think that the retention number would be then for you that would make Hamilton palatable? Like if you could get him down $3 million, $2 million?
I was thinking 2 million, and you're not giving up any kind of an asset, and you look at, can you make the numbers work? And I mean, part of it is the calculation is Tanev coming back, mm-hmm. right? There's 4.5 right there. So if you're getting Dougie Hamilton for 7 and there's the 4.5, you can fit that in and it's not going to hurt you that much. But I think with Hamilton, I mean, he's had a lot of injuries. Mm-hmm. You know, last year wasn't a great season for him. Nope. The offense seems to have dried up. You know, there's red flags there. There's more red flags, I think, than with Seth Jones.
Yeah,
you know, I know that the age thing is, it's more like wear and tear on the body, I think, for Hamilton that's adding up for him right now.
So that's I think the good point. So for $7 million, even with his upside, even with the skill set at its best, is $7 million enough for you to take that risk? And I would say that's too much. It's too much to take on $7 million into your cap situation, roll into the offseason, and have him and Morgan Riley making $14 million on your book the following year. More than that. And, yeah, Tanev might not come back this season, but your hope is that he'll be ready to return for camp next year. And then when you're looking at, hey, what's the ripple effect of this contract, it does become, now you're a little uncomfortable if you need to re-sign Bobby McMahon right in that way. Now, I know some people will say, come on, man, don't overreact to the Troy Stecher thing, but it is harder to envision a reality in which you bring back Troy Stecher if you're bringing in Dougie Hamilton at $7+ million and he finishes the season this way. Like those are just realities.
I mean,
yeah,
Lawton's going to exactly. Go, if you want to bring Lawton back. Yeah. I mean, Robertson needs a new deal. Michelli's an RFA. To go back to your earlier point of McMahon, I think what they need to be careful to do is not lock in a whole bunch of these guys,
right?
Because you're going to want to see what this team is the rest of the season. And I think maybe you extend one of them and decide who that is, and you make that move before the trade deadline. But you do want to keep people uncomfortable, but you also want to just see what they look like in the playoffs. I mean, if it's a disappointing first round exit, as good as it feels right now with the way that they've played, you're not going to want to bring the exact same team back next year. And that's what you would be doing if you started re-upping all of these forwards here right now.
That's why the only guy I'd be extending the contract extension to is Scott Lawton. Like I'm the most comfortable believing like that role and the player that he is not going to change in any way, that he will continue to retain that level of value, especially considering what you think, again, outsider perspective here, but what he has meant to that room and the vibe shift with the team, the feeling like he is already part of their leadership core. Yeah, just he's the only guy that right now I'd be actively working with him and saying, what does an extension look like for you? Like let's have talks ahead of the deadline. You want to play here? Are you interested in going back to Philadelphia? I'm sure he would be at the right number, but if you can get a deal done with him, that's the guy that I would prioritize. That's the only one where I don't I don't think I could see a contract extension realistically. Like, right? Obviously, there's a number that would make you feel uncomfortable, but in a realistic world, I don't imagine there's a deal that he gets tendered and that he signs where Leaf fans would look at it and say, "Oh my God, I can't believe he ended up getting that one." All right, last thing. So Stolarz now has the potential to come back before the Olympics, and really, I think that this is. I don't view this so much as a problem because as great as Hildeby has played, you got options. You can put him back down in the AHL and things are fine. Good problem to have overall. You have too many good goalies, good problem to have. But how do you think this thing shakes out? Do you think it's as clear and simple as that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, look at I don't know how people trying to twist this into a problem of having too many goalies or something. It's the great news is that Hildeby doesn't require waivers to go down, so there's not an issue.
Hmm.
You can bounce them back and forth. And the other thing too is that look at all of the injuries that Woll and Stolarz have had.
Totally.
How long is it going to be till you need Hildeby again? So you don't the idea of trading one of these guys, and there's you're not going to trade Woll, you're not going to trade Hildeby, and Stolarz doesn't have value, so you're not trading anybody. You're just going to be a little bit patient with this, and you're going to wait, and you're going to hope that Woll and Stolarz that nobody gets hurt. But if they do, you have someone who's ready to go, and let Hildeby go down to the AHL and crush it. And when you get to the playoffs, there's a huge advantage to having a goalie with a low salary the way that Hildeby does. He's probably going to be your backup because that frees up you extra money to spend under the way the playoff salary cap's going to work. So having a Hildeby making what's his contract, 875 or something like that,
Hmm.
and being a really compelling option. I mean, even if Stolarz is healthy, he's gonna have to play pretty well to unseat both of those guys as playoff options. So I think it's a great thing. And it's in terms of making a trade or making sure you don't have three goalies, that's an off-season problem. That's not one you're gonna have this year.
Completely agree. Also, I think because people saw Stolarz struggle at the beginning of the season, there's just a little bit of a tendency to think, well, what's he going to look like when he comes back? What happens if he's not performing? Then you get a bit of more of an awkward conversation. My counter to that would be throughout the last 3 years of his career and beyond that, when he's had the proper role for him, which is not overextending himself with games, he's been one of the best in the league. He has been phenomenal throughout his entire career. You look at what the Leafs were defensively to start the season versus what they've been doing now. Even so, Colorado had a bunch of great chances. I think Woll played extremely well last night, but a lot of it, they were firing some pucks from the outside. I thought Toronto did a pretty decent job at keeping them away from the middle of the ice. There were some transition looks and certainly some spooky moments, and he had to make again some big stops. But Stolarz in this goalie environment, coming off of an injury, with a workload that is tampered down because he has Joseph Woll at his side. And even if he didn't, the Leafs' comfort level with playing Hildeby in a bunch of those games and not just forcing him to play. How many did he go in a row? Like 6, 7? It was something along those lines.
Yeah, was it Woll that played 8 or 9 in a row?
Woll did do that, and then he got hurt. But I'm saying at the very beginning of the year when there was no Woll, how many games, and it was Caden Primo, and they were just leaning so heavily on Stolarz. You limit his workload and you put him behind this team the way that they're playing right now. My belief that he is going to struggle and be an issue and that there's going to be real talking points of they got to get Hildeby back up here and what do they do because they can't play this guy. I'm not buying it. It's just not something that I believe is realistic.
Even if that does happen, you can just bring Hildeby up and spot him starts and play him when you want to. I mean, so I just don't see it as a big issue. And
Yeah.
You're right, though. The other one thing that Stolarz does have a lot of experience at is coming back from injuries in the middle of a season and hitting the ground running. You know, he's put up those numbers you're talking about while not playing a lot, in part because he gets hurt a lot. So I think you're right. I think he'll be fine. We don't know what he's dealing with, though, right? And we don't know what kind of procedures he's had. And he's been out a long time, and he's a big man. So I wonder if there's a conditioning stint maybe they do here. I wonder if he plays with the Marlies a game or two, the way that Woll did when he was coming back. And maybe that prolongs the idea of a Stolarz return until after the Olympic break.
You have the luxury of time. You don't need to rush him back whatsoever. I don't get the sense that they are. But when I look at the Olympic break, part of me goes, all right, maybe he wants to feel the puck. Maybe he wants to play in a game before this break settles in and they're off for essentially a month. But my true feeling is, hey, man, what's that really going to do? What's 1 or 2 games? And I don't even think it's going to be 2 games because we're already January 13th here. And I think the Olympic break kicks in, I think after the 4th of February, somewhere around there. First week of February is when they play their last 2 games against Calgary and Edmonton. Just take the time. Just you've done it enough, like you mentioned, over the course of your career where you've hit the ground running after an injury. This is totally about the long haul for you and what you can do come playoff time. The goaltending's in a great spot. There's no need to rock the boat. Take as much time as you need. Get back fully healthy. Use that added month to just recuperate. Anyways, James Mirtle of The Athletic. Thanks as always for making time, buddy. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, JD.
See you, man. Quick break. I want to come back. Ooh. I don't know if this is what Steelers fans wanted. Clearly, you would want to win, but there's got to be some part of you feeling right now, maybe this is it. Maybe this is now time for a look under the hood. That's next. So the one bonus of having a 10 o'clock start for the Leafs on a night when they're playing was that I didn't have to do any recordings and watch stuff later. I got to just jump into the Raptors game and the Steelers-Texans game. I'm going to talk about the Raptors with Joe Casciaro after the break. That was an easy one to turn off. I actually, unfortunately, missed... I caught the Kyle Lowry stuff through social media. I didn't see it live. And I all full well knowing the way that game was going, that he was going to get on the floor at some point and there was going to be a cool moment. And I think that the Raptors did an incredible job. There's one thing, they're unassailable when it comes to the way that they honor former players, and this was certainly one of those cases. And rightfully so. It's Kyle Lowry, for God's sakes. So Steelers-Texans. First half, my only takeaway is I don't know if I've seen a quarterback play worse than C.J. Stroud. That was painful. You got a defense that is just completely balling out. And a game script where you might just need to get to 12 points. And, well, that not maybe because that's what played out, but it felt like that during the game is get 12 points, Houston Texans, and you probably win this game. Aaron Rodgers does not want to hold on to the football. DK Metcalf dropped the biggest pass of the game and was largely invisible throughout the contest. He got one matchup that wasn't on Stingley where he had a big play, but outside of that, he was pretty irrelevant. They're trying to do the Gainwell stuff that they did against the Baltimore Ravens a week before, and you go, yeah, it's a bit of a different story here than Ravens D with no Kyle Hamilton playing the Houston Texans who fly around on that side of the ball. Terrifying. So just take care of the football, and C.J. Stroud refuses to do it. He looked nervous. It was a skittish performance. The fumbles were clear-cut situations where he's uncomfortable, but he's trying to force something to happen when he should just be eating it. The interception in the second half, you're looking at it and going, I actually think the Steelers voodoo might show up here. This is a team that all season long felt quite fraudulent. A team where if you bet against them and they ended up ruining your parlay or your bet, you went, what? What? This team? Steelers are putrid. Flat out. I thought their defense showed up. They played great. TJ Watt was impactful early. Thought that Porter was making plays. Their secondary was playing awesome, and they were playing physical. They knocked Nico Collins out of the game. You hope he's healthy for next week, but getting carted off with a concussion, probably not a great sign for your ability to go a week later, 6 days later. But, yeah, I kept thinking, man, oh, man, they're going to find a way to pull out this game, and Aaron Rodgers will have a moment. Aaron Rodgers, it's him versus this version of C.J. Stroud. Surely he's going to make one play happen. God, the Steelers might only need a field goal. It doesn't materialize. Fourth quarter, C.J. Stroud makes an incredible throw on third down. I think it was like 3rd and 11, 3rd and 10. He whips it down the field. It's like 40 yards to Christian Kirk, who Jaguars fans are watching going, hey, thanks for doing that with us. Where was this? Where was yesterday's 100-yard performance from Christian Kirk with in a huge game? We would have liked that. And so the story becomes two things. One is how far that three. How far can that Houston Texans defense take them? Because if you're the Patriots, you just can't be comfortable watching that, thinking we're going to come out of this all right. I think that if you're the Bills or the Broncos, I would think that they would actually rather play the Patriots, despite the better record and the clear-cut better quarterback who played, actually, honestly, kind of a closer game to C.J. Stroud when you think about it than most Patriots fans would like to admit. Like, he did have the turnovers. He was trying to do the same thing where he's holding on to the ball too long in the pocket, and he put together an awesome fourth quarter, which is what C.J. Stroud did. But by that point, you could tell the Steelers were just defeated. Like, how many times can you put the offense on the field and have 3 and outs where it's just a little check down pass and a guy gets drilled, an incomplete pass because Rodgers doesn't want to take the contact and he just whips it out of bounds, and then a third down sack. That was the form. Is all game long. They could not move the football. So the story becomes that Texans defense really might be the best unit left in the entire postseason. Like, that is unquestionably not on or off the table. C.J. Stroud, huge question mark, a guy that we all looked at as one of the next ones, a guy that gave Caleb Williams famously the advice after that football game, and Caleb Williams has soared past him in terms of league relevancy. So can they overcome that, and can C.J. Stroud find his game, and how much do you trust him for a postseason run to beat some of these other teams on the road that don't have a quarterback who's 41 years old and looks like he's ready for retirement with limited weapons? But yeah, the Steelers, they become the bigger story here because you've had Mike Tomlin now for nearly 2 decades, and you haven't won a playoff game since 2016. You've lost 7 straight playoff games. And most Steelers fans, I believe, do not care about his 500 streak that he's put together as a coach. Clearly, there is a high floor with a Mike Tomlin team. You're not going to bottom out. But that has also hurt their plan at quarterback. They have not had a succession plan for Ben Roethlisberger. The entire time it's been Mason Rudolph's and Duck Hodges's, Justin Fields's, Russell Wilson's, and now a 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers who Tomlin's essentially begging to come back because they know there's nothing else there. And Rodgers, listen, if that's it for him, one hell of a career, one of the most talented quarterbacks that I've ever seen. Some of his stats are insane. One of my favorites is you look at all the greatest quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers has thrown 1 touchdown in his career to a guy that was a first-round pick. That's insane. He was unbelievable. Truly the scariest quarterback in the NFL for a long stretch, scarier than Tom Brady and scarier than Peyton Manning, and he overlapped with those guys. The things that he could do with his legs, the way that he could throw it on the run, all of those things. But he's just not the same guy. Like, he's not. He doesn't want to take contact, and why would he at his age? Like, it felt painful watching some of those Texans bowl over Steelers offensive linemen and hit him clean. Yeah, he's going to drop the football. Hard to criticize him. So he's probably moving on. But yeah, if I'm the Steelers, I don't know how many more years I can just do the same. I know that you have a cultural thing, but at this point, a decade without a playoff win is really tough pill to swallow. Quick break, and then Joe Casciaro. As with most things, the sequel was not as good as the original. Raptors get blown out immediately by the Philadelphia 76ers yesterday. A healthier version of both teams. And I'm not going to focus too much on that today. But really cool the way that they celebrated Kyle Lowry. Really impossible to screw that up. It's Kyle Lowry. You didn't expect that the Raptors would be like, oh, I guess, yeah, this could be his last game. Whatever. I thought that the organization had a lot of great touches, but also it was very cool to see the fans get to celebrate him in that way. So if you're looking at a spin for positives from last night's game, it's that they picked a good moment to get blown out by a team and have it be meaningless, and allowing Kyle Lowry to have that. So Joe Casciaro joins me now of theScore. What's up, buddy? How we doing?
Going on, man? You couldn't have had me on after the Sunday game. Good Lord.
Probably should have done that.
Follow.
Probably should have done the Sunday game. But honestly, I'm not really going to focus on too much from this game because I just don't really think that we learned anything. It was a good performance from Philadelphia, but I had already texted you a bunch of the topics, and I'm going to stick with them. But I'll start with this. I didn't text you. Do you think the Raptors are clutch or lucky?
I think you have to be lucky to be clutch, if I'm being honest. Like, once you get into that situation pretty frequently where games are coming down to a possession here, a possession there, a bounce there, a bounce here, I mean, you got to be a little lucky, right? So I think luck has been baked into it, but I also think, getting Brandon Ingram, for example, and addressing a need like that is a big part of why they have thrived for the most part in the clutch this season, because they have an actual shot creator and shot maker. I think the offense flows better. Scotty Barnes is making good decisions. So in general, I think it's mostly just that they're a better team, but I'd be lying if I said it had nothing to do with luck, because any team that thrives in the clutch the way they do without, a bevy of top tier talent, there's got to be some luck baked in.
Okay, so obviously there's luck, clearly. Like you're bang on with that. You have to be. It's the good to be lucky, lucky to be good situation with them. What I do think is very true is two things. One, the Ingram stuff that you pointed to, the evolution of Scotty Barnes, having RJ Barrett when he's healthy, and even Emmanuel Quickly's shot making. That the combination of those four guys late in games makes the offense hum in a way that it hasn't in years past. But secondarily, why I do think that they're clutch is they don't give up on games, and there does seem to be a belief within this team where they're down to the Celtics all game long, and they're just not giving up. They have Elijah Martin out there, and they're gutting out an effort despite being outmatched talent-wise and not having the same collection of top-tier talent to be able to win the game. They do have they've got the ability where on a night where Barnes doesn't really have it, or they lose Brandon Ingram like they did in the Charlotte game, where RJ Barrett can just say, yeah, I'm turning it on right now, and I'm going to be the emotional heartbeat of the team, and I'm going to get to the rim and create for us. So I think that, yes, they have been lucky. There's no doubt about it. But there are definitely things to point to this season and say, in crunch time, the time where people thought that this team was going to be at its worst, that because they just don't really have shooting and you anticipate you need like big-time shot makers. Like you've seen that stat, right? There's, I think, 7-0 in games where they shoot 26% or worse from three. But okay, so I think that they are designed in a way where, of course, that's not sustainable over the course of, say, a playoff run, but that they are designed in a way where that actually makes a little bit more sense for them, considering how they play defense and how they get to the rim and where Brandon Ingram shoots from.
Yeah, and they are, to your point, a generally scrappy team too, right? And when you get into those situations where, like I said, that the margins are slim and it's possession by possession and bounce for bounce, there is an element of, and I don't want to be the guy who's just like one team wanted it more. Obviously, there's a lot more that goes into it. But when the margins are that thing, there is an element of like, are you going to be the grimy team that hits the deck when there's a loose ball? And I think the Raptors have some guys that are willing to do that. And to be honest, even to Brandon Ingram's credit, which I don't think a lot of people would talk about in his game prior to this year, he's been showing that too. I mean, there was a play, I don't know if you remember last night, I think it was in the first half or maybe the third quarter.
I was going to say, if it was in the first half, I saw it. If it was in the second half, I did not.
It might have been the second half. The Raptors were down like 30 already, and Brandon Ingram hit the deck to try to retrieve a loose ball. It really has been contagious on this team. I don't know if it's the Jamal Shed effect or what, but there's a scrappiness that has spread throughout this team that, again, when you combine that with now having an actual elite shot creator and shot maker, and also I think the contagiousness of just being a more competitive team. Like I say this all the time, but you'll have in a season teams, good teams that win some games when they're really undermanned, or you look at the rosters and you think they have no business winning them. And I always say, like, that exact same team or that exact same roster, if they happen to be in a season where the team just wasn't good and that same roster had to take the floor, they would get drilled. But when that roster takes the floor midway through the season, when they've actually been good and there's a couple stars out, I don't know if it's the belief that they've built throughout the season, maybe the relevance they've built and actually feeling like every game matters or what it is, but you tend to see the contagiousness of good teams ending up staying scrappy pretty much no matter who they've put out on the floor. And I know it's the wrong time to be talking about that the morning after they just got drilled at home. But for the most part, I think the Raptors have been that. I think they've been a team that you can count on to be scrappy no matter who's in or out of the lineup. I think they've been a team that you can pretty much count on to compete no matter who's on the other side of the floor. And I think that's very refreshing.
I don't think that they get intimidated by their opponents.
No, look at Elijah Martin.
Yeah, and I think that this is I was thinking about this like 2 nights ago. It was against the Celtics. I think culture has always mattered in sports, and it's something that gets thrown around as a buzzword oftentimes, and we make these false equivalencies, or we try to staple things onto culture that are not real. I think teams use it as a buzzword at times to be dismissive of certain answers. But with this team, one thing that I believe has been a true success this year is that they are building a real culture of effort and consistency, which is you show up and you are going to be diving for loose balls. You are going to be playing defense, or else you're going to be losing playing time. Like, for example, I've been frustrated with the way that they've used Gradey Dick this season. Just like, he's a first-round pick for you, and when you're giving Ochai Agbaji, who just for long stretches has not really looked playable. Yeah, he has his flashes, but you're probably going to use him in a salary dump. He's not a long-term piece here. I'd rather you be giving those minutes to Gradey Dick. You can't shoot the basketball particularly well. It'd be nice to have his spacing. But you watch him on defense, and there's a lot of Matador stuff, and you go, yeah, that's not what they're doing here. They're not tolerating guys who are going to be on the floor and not give them a consistent effort on that end. And so he gets pulled. And so there are some games where I'm looking at it, like the Charlotte game was another example of this, where they missed, 17, 18 threes in a row. It was painful. And I'm going, can you put Gradey Dick on the floor? And he has 2 possessions where he gets blown by twice, and he tries to do his little cheater poke move. Doesn't work out. It's 2 layups, and boom, he's off the floor. And I go, that's what you do when you're establishing this culture. That's one thing that's going to happen for you. So I think that in the NBA now, not to say, again, it wasn't important before, but when you look at how many guys are resting, how teams treat the regular season, and as you enter more of the parity era where everybody's kind of flat and the standings have, to me, more significance because there aren't going to be as many runaway teams as there used to be in the past, where we know what the standings are going to look like by November 28th, that having a team that hustles consistently and can bring in depth guys who are going to give you that effort level and who are hungry for those minutes is going to benefit you when it comes to things like playoff seeding or avoiding play-in games, even if you are punching above your talent.
Yeah, and also depth really matters when you want to play the way Darko Rajakovic wants his teams to play, right? Where you're moving a lot on the offensive end off the ball, and the ball is moving and all that. But on the defensive end, you're pressuring the ball and you're rotating a lot. So, you need depth to play Darko's system. Depth is more important than ever, to your point, in the modern NBA. And then I like that you brought up Gradey, because I think Grady's a good example of that, like you said, where, there is a culture here of being held accountable, and you don't just get minutes anymore because they're this rebuilding team that's more focused on the process than the results. The results matter now. And Grady's an excellent example of that, because, I had some people even yesterday on social media kind of when I was criticizing Gradey Dick and saying that he's essentially right now just a corner shooting specialist, because as an overall shooter, he's below average. And, I get that a lot of people keep pointing out like he's doing the little things better. Everything except shooting and scoring. But it's like, okay, that's fine. I think he's gotten better at some of the little things. But guess what? You're in year 3 now of your career on a team that's finally trying to win. At some point, you have to do the big thing that you were actually drafted to do. Yeah. Okay, I don't want to always hear about the little things for Gradey Dick when he's trying to hold off guys like AJ Lawson and Elijah Martin for minutes. Like, come on. And yeah, like Gradey Dick's first experience trying to earn minutes on an NBA team that's actually trying to win is not going well. He is not earning those minutes. And I think if we're being completely honest, if this was completely by merit and it had nothing to do with the stock a team has put in a player and expectations for a player, then I think Gradey Dick would be out of the rotation already.
Yeah. I will say, in his defense, as a younger player, you're right, it's year 3. But having to adjust now to a roster that has multiple shot creators and takers to the depth in which they have now versus the ecosystem he was in last year, you give a bit of a grace period. Like, I'm not as horned up to try to throw him in trades as some other people are. Like, I think that there could be a situation where this year stinks, and next year, when they hopefully have what is a little bit more of a concrete roster with fewer questions about what the long-term future is, that he can still reclaim his spot and he can find his game a little bit more. Because you saw that last season when they were really leaning on him offensively and they were allowing him to not just catch and shoot, but to create off the dribble and score off the dribble, that his game flourished. So to me, there's a little bit of patience there. But yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. Based on merit right now, it's hard for a guy like Darko to watch him play and say, sorry, why would I not be putting Elijah Martin out there if he's going to be hitting like a comparable amount of shots, but also giving me defense? So
being an absolute dog.
So that brings me to this, though. So Marc Stein, he reported that this, quote, execs around the league believe the Raptors front office is facing win now pressure, end quote. Do you believe that they should be feeling that right now?
I don't. And yeah, I'm not going to come out and say Marc Stein's wrong. Obviously, the guy's a very respected veteran reporter, and I'm sure he's got his sources that are giving him good information. But I don't believe the Raptors front office should be under win now pressure. Like, they went into just last season. That was only a year ago. That was supposed to be officially year one of a rebuild. And the first year, that process is bigger, more important than results, even though we know it was actually year two, but whatever. And you had Darko just a few weeks ago saying he's constantly trying to remind the media that this is still part of a rebuild. Again, we don't have to believe it, but that's what they're saying. And at the end of the day, their franchise star is a 24-year-old who's only in year one of a 5-year contract that is looking better by the day because he didn't qualify for the higher max. So Scotty Barnes at 25% of the cap over the next 5 years with no options, all of a sudden looks like one of the better contracts in the league for young stars. He's in year one of that contract, okay? Colin Murray-Boyles, I have really high hopes for him. And I'm not saying he's going to be a superstar or maybe even a perennial all-star or anything like that. But what Colin Murray-Boyles can do on the defensive side of the basketball already as a, 20-year-old rookie, his IQ, his playmaking, some of the shooting he's kind of flashed. I don't know how sustainable that is, but still, just everything I've seen from Colin Murray-Boyles, I think he's going to be a very good player. He's a rookie. Again, your franchise guy is 24. They've got guys like Jamal Shed, other players around the roster where it's like, okay, even a guy like Shed, maybe he ends up just being a really good reserve for a long time, but that's still an important piece, and he's still so young. Say what you will about Brandon Ingram already being in his prime or RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickly, especially probably being a little overpaid. But like even RJ, he's only mid-20s. There's a lot of young talent here, and this very much still feels like a team ascending. The Scotty piece is important, and that contract is important. And they have all their picks now for the next 7 years, whatever it is. There's just no reason or no logic, in my view, to rush this. And yeah, you could look at the East and say it's wide open and it's there for the taking. But at the same time, the teams above them are also thinking that. And so I don't think the Raptors are in a situation where it's like, hey, the East is wide open and we might never get another shot with this core. It's like, no, I don't think that's the case. I think they should maybe make a move for a big if they can. And it doesn't have to be a star big. I know everyone was like talking about Anthony Davis, but there are guys like Mark
Anthony
Williams
Davis
out there and Day'Ron Sharp.
He's not playing again.
Right. There's that too. But even when he was playing,
yeah.
Guess what you could expect? That he was soon going to not be playing again.
Yes.
Right? Like, and so I never really got that. But anyway, like there were kind of smaller names like Mark Williams and Day'Ron Sharp out there that some people might not even know who the heck those guys are. They're not going to excite many people. But again, if you're building this thing prudently and you're just looking at this as like still kind of trying to figure out what they have around Scotty, seeing what this mix might look like in higher intensity games later in the season, in their first taste of playoff action together, I think the only thing you really want to do this year is shore up the front court depth a bit, get Jakob Poeltl healthy, and kind of see how everything shakes out. If a no-brainer deal for an impact player pops up, then obviously you investigate it, but I don't understand why this team would rush this process all of a sudden and why the front office would be under that pressure. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
So, yes, I'm not doubting Marc Stein's reporting, but this is execs around the league are saying, not the Raptors internally are saying. So I think we have some breadcrumbs where Bobby Webster before the season had talked about how the roster isn't going to be the same come February, right? But who knows? That could end up just being an Ochai Agbaji salary dump, and that's all it ends up being, right? Like they want to get under that apron, and they should be trying to get under that apron. But to your point about the perception of the organization, my sense from Raptors fans this year, and granted, this is like totally anecdotal and me when I get on social media, but it was even seeing people I respect who cover the team, the way that they're reacting to this is largely, God, this is so refreshing to what the last couple of years have been. Yeah, this isn't where the Raptors. So I understand the case of you don't really want to just be in the middle of the pack and not have a championship ceiling, but also finish in a playoff spot and be the team that maybe nobody wants to face in the first round, but nobody also believes is actually going to make it to a finals. That was the old antithesis of what Masai Ujiri was trying to do after the DeRozan run. So you don't want to end up back in that situation. But we are talking about year one with this team, with Brandon Ingram, Scotty Barnes, and this collection of players. There's no urgency from the people that are consuming this product of, oh my God, they just need to make this trade because that would put them over. Like, nobody's buying that. Nobody thought Anthony Davis was going to suddenly change the ceiling of this team like Kawhi Leonard did. Nobody believed that Trae Young was going to change the ceiling of this team the way that guy did. To me, the urgency lies in two areas. One is, I know Scotty Barnes is young, and that's important perspective to have, that he's 24 years old in year one of a contract. Super important to be thinking that way, because when you become Eastern Conference Player of the Week and you're playing to this level, I think there is a bit of an added urgency within your organization to make sure that you capitalize and you find out just how high that ceiling can go, right? And two is the conundrum with RJ Barrett, where they're in a situation looking at him saying, God, he's so important when he's on the floor. There's been many games this year where he's been their best offensive player unequivocally. And yet, when you look at their cap situation, it's very difficult to envision how it makes sense signing him to a contract and feeling like, yeah, now you are stapled into this situation in this team, when we all know it's a good team. It might have room to grow with some of those players that you mentioned, including Scotty Barnes. But ultimately, it feels like a pretty capped ceiling at an expensive number. So where do your improvements lie as an organization in a world where the rest of the NBA ain't looking to take on Jakob Poeltl or Emmanuel quickly? Like that's one, those reports I do believe, that teams are not interested in taking on IQ's $32 million a season. Like, yeah, he was 2 of 10 from 3 last night. It's supposed to be his strongest skill set. And he just looks like a fine offensive piece, not what they were anticipating when they gave him that contract, which was a guy that they were buying early on who was going to turn into, frankly, a fringe star level player.
Well, if you remember, he was supposed to be Tyrese Maxey light.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And as the last couple of games have reminded us, he does not belong in any conversations with Tyrese Maxey, who's a bona fide star. To your point about the kind of in the middle thing, the one thing I'll say is not all teams in the middle are created equal, right? Like
Agree.
There's stuck in the middle where you're what the Chicago Bulls were for a few years, with like very veteran stars that everyone knows have capped your ceiling, and you're very obviously just like earmarked for the play-in from the beginning of the year. Like, to me, that's stuck in the middle, where you got these veteran stars. They're not going to get better. This is your team, and this is what it is, and like enjoy the play-in round for the next 3 years. I don't think the Raptors are stuck in the middle. I think they're in the middle right now. But the way the roster is constructed, they don't have to be stuck. And I think that's an important distinction. But the RJ question and that Quickly contract, I think, is a big part of it. Because, when they first made that deal for OG going to New York, I think a lot of people, and myself included, saw it as, look, the target of that deal was Emmanuel Quickly because of his ceiling, because of his style of play, and the way that his skill set perfectly fits Scotty Barnes. And RJ Barrett was a bit of a throw-in, and it was like, okay, we're bringing the hometown kid home, and maybe it's a bit of a reclamation project and seeing if Darko Rajakovic's system can help him, and it has.
Yep.
And now we're sitting here a couple years later, and I would say that RJ Barrett is more important to this team than Emmanuel Quickly, and has, for the most part, played better than Emmanuel Quickly as a Raptor.
I think unquestionably to both those points. Yeah.
They still need what Quickly brings from a shooting perspective when he's on. Like, when Quickly's playing well, they do need what he brings. And that's why even, people talk about starting Jamal Shed over him. Look, I'm a huge Jamal Shed fan, and Jamal Shed has shot the ball well in stretches, but they still need what Quickly brings more than what Jamal Shed brings right now with the starting unit. But what I will say is that with Barrett emerging as a more important player and with more questions about Barrett's future and the contract and everything, I think what's become a sticking point is how Emmanuel Quickley's contract has muddied the waters elsewhere, where it's like now you have to maybe think about RJ Barrett being expendable because you're looking at not being able to move off that Quickley contract. You're looking at the long-term contracts for other guys. And to your point, wondering how you're going to get better and what you're going to do. And you start having to look at moving RJ Barrett. So I think, unfortunately, one of the reasons people are probably frustrated with Quickley is because, if you're paying attention, you'll realize that contract, and if he's not playing up to it, and if that's not a movable contract, muddies the waters for guys like RJ and how they're going to keep him. Because if you end up giving RJ probably what he wants on his next deal, and arguably what he might deserve if he keeps playing like this, and I'll even give it to him. He's improved a bit on the defensive side too. But if you end up giving him that, and you haven't been able to move some of your other bigger contracts, now you're looking at a team that could be stuck in the middle. And so it's going to be, a very delicate dance the Raptors are going to have to try to pull off here over the next year or two.
That's totally bang on. They're not stuck in the middle, but if they make one wrong move, they absolutely can be. That can change quickly. That's not to, no pun intended. You move off your first round pick and you try to bring in, so like, for example, ESPN pumped out an article the other day where they basically had it as, Ja Morant makes the most sense in Toronto. And part of me goes, as down as I have been on Ja the last couple of seasons, he's making $39 million and Quickley's making $32. And if you told me like, hey, you can take a shot at this guy who's another distressed asset and has shown the highs that he has shown, and I go, God, there is a fairly compelling case to that. But then you think about how you're adding a first-round pick to this, and now all of a sudden you're the Ja Morant team, and then the number goes up to 42 the following season, and you've got you've got RJ, who now you kind of have to pay because you're pot committed to this team, and those five guys all absorbing a ton of money for you. And I'm like, man, this is a team that needs to get deeper, not shallow in terms of the talent pool or asset pool. I just don't think that you should be rushing when this is the market. And I would say the same thing with the Quickley trade. Like, if you got a deal where you could move off of him in a way that you thought was additive, I'm not saying that he is an unprotectable player, but right now the market just had Trae Young move for Corey Kispert and CJ McCollum.
CJ McCollum's expiring contract.
Right. Like, there are multiple players out there that I think fit in the Quickley category of, it can get you a bucket, not great defensively. You bring in this money. No, they don't want to really have this contract. They're available for a lower price. He's at the bottom of that list. Like, if you're a team, you're not moving for Emmanuel Quickley because, like, why wouldn't you be saying, well, why wouldn't we do this with Domantas Sabonis, for example, or Ja Morant? Like, these are pieces that make more sense for us. I just think that they are in a spot where they should be very patient, see how the season plays out. And if they need to extend RJ Barrett at a number they feel comfortable with, worry about trying to shovel off the Emmanuel Quickley contract in the offseason and tinker with your roster moving forward when there's more available to you than what this market is right now. Like, I do not view this as the time for the Raptors to be making a move that makes them more definitive as a roster moving forward.
Yeah, and just with respect to Ja Morant, listen, I get that people are going to throw the Raptors kind of in those talks because, they probably sniffed around on AD and Trae Young and maybe Domantas Sabonis. But, like, Ja Morant, for as entertaining as a player as he was, and for as much as he drove winning and got, frankly, some teams to overachieve early in his career, like, you consider some of the flaws in Trae Young's game, especially on the defensive end, and how diminished of an asset he had become because of some of those flaws in the contract stuff. It's like, well, imagine a guy that was like pretty much as bad defensively as Trae Young because he just doesn't care about that end of the floor, except without any of the offensive utility or upside of Trae Young. And, like, I get Ja Morant can still get to the rim and he can be a high flyer, but even that skill set has already diminished at this point in his career. The guy won't defend, can't shoot. Not only can't shoot, but he's a star guard who gets guarded by centers sometimes because teams just aren't afraid of him. And he's got the off-court issues. And he's on a long-term deal that is not cheap. So it's like, if you watched how the Trae Young situation unfolded and realized how poorly teams around the league saw that guy, consider that Ja Morant is like an even more distressed asset, a worse player in my opinion. And I just, like, you talk about wanting to get stuck in the middle. Adding him to a team like the Raptors have now is how you do that. For me, like the teams that should be going after John Moran is like maybe a Brooklyn just desperate to get a star in there, Sacramento because that's what Sacramento does. But the Raptors, it would be a huge mistake if they dip their toes in those waters.
Totally agree. The only move that they should be making is one that people look at universally and say they had to do that. Anything short of it, the desperation to win now, like those league execs are saying, to me is completely nonsensical for where this team's at. Joe Casciaro of theScore. Thanks as always, buddy. I enjoyed it.
Yep. Always like talking hoops with you, man.
Yep. Take care, bud. I get it. The East is flat. Not a lot of trustworthy teams up at the top. Scotty Barnes is playing this way. Brandon Ingram's playing this way. You've got that contract with RJ Barrett. And all you can think of is, it's tempting to think about what else would make this team take that leap. To me, it actually is way more about developing out their depth and adding more pieces throughout the lineup than it is some star player that is going to magically take this team to a different level. Are there guys out there that fit that bill? Of course there are, but I don't see them as available right now. And the lack of depth that the roster has currently doesn't lead me to believe, as he mentioned, with Darko's system, that the Raptors are going to have a lot of success. And frankly, the injury should play a part in this as well. That it's been a great season, knock on wood, for Brandon Ingram's health. They've had a lot of guys in and out of the lineup. And banking on those dudes, having to absorb more minutes, more role, I'm just not there right now. So to me, it's be patient, make small fringy moves, and unfortunately, unless something happens that is plain and obvious for RJ Barrett or for Emmanuel Quickly, get that work done in the offseason and play it out this year in a postseason where you really stress test what it is that you have. They've got to add more guys. That's why the Colin Murray-Boyles thing has been so huge for them. Like, what a development this guy has been. And does that happen if he's not able to get more minutes? I don't know. Like, you don't really know what you have in him unless he's playing this role. He can rebound. He's a dog. He's smart. The playmaking that Joe mentioned, the IQ piece of it is huge because, like, you think about Siakam early in his career with the Raptors, right? He's just always a developmental story for this team, and he was a late first-round pick versus a high lottery. But it took a while for him to develop more than just, hey, he's in the dunker spot or he's breaking out on a fast break, and those are the two dimensions of his game. Like, Colin Murray-Boyles is way ahead of that. Already one of my favorite Raptors, I think probably the case for many people, but, and God, did they ever luck out. Brooklyn taking Igor Demin ahead of him. I think if you do that redraft today, he goes 4. And at the latest 5. There's a conversation about it, but I think that he goes 4. Anyway, to me, the Raptors are in a totally fine spot. And it's just, it's the nature of the business where we're going to talk about trades and this guy and that guy and a big name that could be coming to this market. And again, this is an organization that has hit on depreciating assets or guys that the league ended up getting lower on. I don't see those guys fitting this roster right now, not at the expense of what it would take you to get it, and certainly not at the expense of my pick. I want to keep that flexibility open for when that right move actually materializes. That's when you make a deal like the Kawhi Leonard trade. Anyways, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at JD Bunkis. Reach out anytime. Quick break, and we'll hit what we missed. All right, let's wrap this up. So Papa can take a nap. Armin is here. What's up? What did we miss?
After the Jags loss to the Bills,
Yeah.
Liam Cohen's press conference.
Oh, yeah, this.
One of the reporters, Lynn Jones, tried to uplift Liam Cohen pretty much. She said, congratulations on your success. Hold your head up. You had a magnificent season. You did a great job out there. So just keep your head up. Adam Schefter really perpetuated this clip, putting it out, saying it was an awesome moment between the reporter and head coach Liam Cohen. And then a lot of reporters, after a lot of journalists in our industry came out and were kind of like, I don't know if this is awesome. I don't know if a reporter should be doing this. I don't know if this is our job. Pat McAfee had some comments on it afterwards, kind of saying, like, he was on the reporter side, that this should happen more in our industry and we don't have to be so negative. So where do you stand on a reporter trying to uplift the coach.
Yeah, listen, we didn't get to this yesterday because I just didn't think of it as a big enough story. Not considering everything that had just happened on NFL Sunday. To me, it's kind of a footnote. I'm really not as bothered by it as a lot of journalists are. But I agree with the sentiment of that's not their job. And I guess my fear is strong, but I think two things were cringeworthy with it. One is the way the Jaguars reposted it to their social media. Like, you just lost a heartbreaking loss. And that's what you're taking from your media conference and propagating forward. It just makes me feel like you're a very unserious franchise having that move. Like, it happened, sure. But the idea that this is the overarching story that you want to push out there after you were maybe the best team in the AFC and you lost a game the way that you did, it's a little embarrassing for the Jags. The reason why I think some journalists are up in arms about this is because the way that sports media is trending, and listen, I'm not a journalist. I'm a fan who talks about the teams that I love and the sports that I love and the things that interest me. But you're seeing this, and you'd be a fool to ignore it, that there is way more, especially the push from younger people of, hey, we want homers everywhere. Hey, is this guy even a fan of the team? You see that it's pervasive with every single team in this market and every single team around sports right now. A large faction of people in social media being like, and this guy hates the team. And I'll be honest, I have not come across, I know a lot of people in media. I agree actually with the McAfee sentiment that there certainly are people in this industry that I don't think really love sports or are bored of sports, and it's no longer a passion for them. It is just a paycheck now. They treat it like a job, but that's every job, right? Like, what world is, like, are we batting 1,000 with people who are hyper passionate and love their career and overly grateful and not just doing it for the pay? Like, so I think a little bit of sure, but also, come on. But if that's the standard, that's what it has to be with sports. I just believe that there should be multiple voices, dissenting opinions, and people who do things differently. So if, what's this lady's name? Lynn Jones?
Lynn Jones.
If Lynn Jones wants to go to a media conference and say that to Liam Cohen, and that is reflective of the way that she covers the team, I just do not have an issue with it. I think that's fine to have that in that space. But the pressure that something like that, the issue is there's a pressure that something like this creates for people who are just trying to do the job the way they view it as correctly, which is they're not supposed to be cheerleaders for the team. I know a lot of you don't want to hear this. And like, again, I do a show called Leafs Talk where we are pretty much cheerleaders for the team. And that's the way we decide to cover a show. That's a version of fan service that there is out there. I value the reporters that go to that and do not have any allegiances to the team, that do not view it as their job to try to create more PR for a group and try to get social media clicks. Like, I think I've referenced this before, but right now, PR schools are cranking out students. The world right now is PR schools are blooming, journalism schools are shrinking. Journalism graduates compared to PR graduates, it's 10 to 1. Honestly, you think that sounds like an exaggeration. That's true. I don't want to live in a world where every single reporter is covering the team the same way because they have to be quote unquote positive or they have to look like a quote fan of the team. And listen, man, you see this with a lot of the coverages. They want people who are going to play ball. I don't particularly, I want to watch a homer on my home broadcast, but if you're watching a game part of the reason why people crave, hey, I want the game to be on TNT and I want the game to be on, well, not on TNT anymore because I'm referencing the days of old, but yeah, I want my game on NBC. I want my game on ESPN. The reason is you want fresh eyes and impartial eyes to tell you the way that they view the team, because there is too much of a groupthink. There is too much of a monoculture amongst people that are in it and feel those pressures of, well, I want to make sure that the fans don't think I'm a hater.
Yeah.
And I applaud. I actually think that it's far braver now, the journalists that actually try to do the job as best they can, who are not thirsty for being liked on social media and just ask the questions that a large portion of the fan base wants asked of the team. Not everybody fans the same way. I don't believe being critical of a team is in some way bad for the team. I think it's an important byproduct. And so what I would say to the McAfee part of this, where he's like takes that massive shot at journalists, and he's like, most of them want to be political journalists, and they all hate their job, and sports are fun, and it's a privilege. You go like, man, Pat McAfee, no offense, dude, but you're a millionaire pro athlete who got to step into a media career. Like, Grant, big personality, very funny guy, very talented guy. I don't have any issues with him having like the career he has. It's well deserved, but him trying to like basically paint the entire sports media ecosystem through the lens of a former player who has absolutely no idea what the day-to-day grind is for most reporters. Like, this isn't my idea, but I did see someone posted this. They went like, hey, Pat McAfee, if you hate journalists so much, go a show without using their work, right? No, Pat McAfee, we've all seen it. He throws up the chyron, and he's got the post of someone's tweet that's a breaking news thing, and then he comments on it. Like, a lot of those journalists really do care about sports. A lot of those journalists are passionate about sports. Those are generally, by the way, the people that I try to get onto this show. And they work their ass off. And I think it's harder for them in a world where they know, just for doing their job the way that it is supposed to be done for them, the way that they were taught, and the way that you need it to be, which is impartial from a lot of people.
Gets the most meaningful quotes usually.
Gets hate. Knowing that you're not going to make a ton of money. You're not going to be Pat McAfee on ESPN. Like, buddy, listen, again, it's hard to have gotten where Pat McAfee is, and it required a tremendous amount of talent. He's got some things that you can't teach. I think that he is a courageous speaker. I got a lot of time for Pat McAfee. Like, again, I think I know he has. He's been on this podcast. I'm not trying to like fire Barbs here or be Mr. like start sports media stuff. Not like he would care anyways. But I think that it's very dismissive to just say everybody in sports should just be putting on pom-poms and rooting for the team no matter what is happening with them, and have journalism turn into more PR. We've got enough PR. There's enough outlets for fans now where you should be able to get the coverage that you like. There's so many shows. There's so many writers. There's so many good personalities on Twitter that and who end up doing blogs or their own podcasts that started just from being fans, that I just don't think you need to try to create a world where that's everybody. Much like it was before, where it used to be, and I think Bill Simmons deserves a lot of credit for this, a world where most people that were talking about sports were supposed to be completely impartial, and he was one of the first guys that was like, yeah, I'm a huge Celtics fan, and this is who I love. And then I think the world kind of zagged a little too far, where everyone started to put their allegiances down and try to be a Bill Simmons clone, a local sports radio host. But yeah, you got to have some people who are impartial and who look at sports as a business and who look at covering the team like it is their job, to give that diversity of coverage. So I don't agree with it when, much like most things, I don't agree when the extremes end up getting kicked in either way.
And I think the setting matters, Bunk.
I'm a cowardly centrist.
Like at a press conference to do that, it makes everyone else feel a bit awkward. How
For
about
sure.
if I'm about to ask the head coach a really tough question after you just gassed him up and gave all that friendly stuff? Well, it makes it a little harder for me, or makes it a little more awkward, or I might not get the best answer now because that happened.
What I would say to that, though, is, listen, if you are going to be a good journalist, you can't let that affect you.
But how about if the coach is affected by it?
Yeah.
After he just heard all of that.
Yeah, he might be. But my read on it when I watched Liam Cohen get that, because I saw the clip when the Jaguars reposted it, and then I made fun of Blake. I went, this is your team.
Actually, that social media point, I wanted to jump on that because that seems like an every week almost that we discuss at some point that the social media teams for these franchises are not understanding the tenor of the actual team.
But that's because it's their job to be positive.
I get it, but their job is also to figure out what's the vibe in the locker room right now. Is it awkward for me to post this, or does it just matter that I get likes?
Yeah, sometimes there's misses on it, but again, like you're a team employee. So your job, listen, man, if you're working in social media for a team, you are a part of PR. That's what I'm saying, is it's PR'd up everywhere you go. And people, I'm telling you, man, there's a large faction of fans. I've seen them in my mentions, whatever. You see them all over social media, where they're demanding this world where everybody is a fan of their team or puts the respect on the team or doesn't do it the way that they want to do it. If we entered a world where every single coverage team in every city was the exact same, where they were just wearing the pom-poms, sports would be far less compelling. The people who are dissenting voices now, it is harder to do because of social media. I'm not crying for them. I'm not saying that like you don't get to live a very cool job. And I think, listen, I talk to college media students all the time, and I tell them, listen, if you want to be successful in this business and you want to actually not burn out in this business, you have to be passionate about it. I've told this to you guys, right? Like, you know, sports media now, the pay when you're trying to get into this thing is so low that if you don't love it, it's going to burn you out. And the rewards down the line are not what they used to be. And so you've got to love it. And McAfee, in that sense, is right. And people who criticize media figures who they view as just only negative are right if they're sensing someone who doesn't actually care about the product they're putting out there. I'm telling you, now in the world of podcasting and 24-hour media and social media, I just think if you are inauthentic and you don't really love it, people aren't really going to consume your coverage anyway. And I don't mean love it in terms of you love the team. I mean love what you do. So, yeah, I just thought it was an unnecessary shot, and that everybody who tried to criticize any journalist who had a dissenting opinion is, to me, part of what I think is the problem. It's not Lynn Jones saying what she said. It's the reaction to anybody that felt differently that I take an issue with. Anyways, what's next?
Your Seahawks play their first playoff game this Saturday. I'm curious if you knew about this before. Like, I found out about it. I saw that.
Yeah, I did know.
The Seahawks sent out a warning to their season ticket holders who are reselling their playoff tickets. This is what they said, in part. As communicated prior to the 25 season, renewal eligibility may be impacted if it is determined that your season tickets, including playoff games, were used primarily for resale.
Mm-hmm.
They have a bit of an advantage here, Bunk, because it's just that they have such a big fan base and that there's no franchises around Seattle as well in the NFL.
Oh.
Like, just geographically. Not too close. California teams are the closest.
California teams are close.
Do you think it's possible for teams, let's say in the Toronto market or just in the NHL in general, to do this kind of thing?
Everybody should do this. Listen, I hate resale, and I've seen people do it's my money, and if I want to spend my money,
for sure, capitalism.
Then I want to be able to sell these tickets to whoever I want.
Yeah.
This isn't just buying a ticket. These are season ticket holders.
Mm-hmm.
If you are a season ticket holder, you are a member of a club, and that is a privilege. And if you are the way that they're doing this is they're evaluating your season tickets and saying, if you're someone who's constantly just putting your tickets on the resale market and using this club membership to drive a profit, that's not the point of this. And frankly, every sports fan who's against this, you're a moron. You're not a real sports fan. Because the number one complaint from people that I always get is like, this is too expensive. And it is. Most of the tickets are like, this is not the way that it's supposed to be, where it's a luxury item to be able to go to games. And if you are just someone who is buying seasons tickets and trying to make a profit off of those, you should lose your seasons tickets. If you've got to buy your ticks and you got to sell them for a game, you got to be able to offload them, sure. But who isn't sick of these people that buy those tickets for the primary purpose of resale? That's how we end up in a place where a Ticketmaster wants to come in here and says like, yes, hell yeah, we want to be a part of this. We're going to get our cut too. And it prices out a lot of fans. Again, if you're just buying tickets as a one-off and you are not a season ticket holder, and then you say, oh, I got to resell these tickets and you make a little buck, I got no problem with that. But if you're someone who's just doing it to make money, you are predatory, and I don't mind trying to get rid of you. It is Leafs game day. You know what that means. It means that you can score a Popeye's chicken sandwich for only $6 in classic or spicy. Make it your new game day tradition. Get your $6 chicken sandwich at a Popeye's near you. Reach out anytime at JD Bunkis. We will see you tomorrow.